In this chapter, we're going to talk about floats. Now, it's really interesting. The origin of floats in CSS really came about because of the use of images, floating images. We used to do this in HTML, and I'll be describing that in this chapter. But essentially floating to the right and allowing text to flow to the left and around a given image, and vice versa, floating to the left and having text flow around to the right of the image. These were desirable features that we were able to do in HTML using presentational HTML. And so they came over into CSS in order to get that kind of very common look and feel. But interestingly enough, floats were, while they were created for this very sort of limited use, it became clear over time that they worked as elements that could be floated to create columns that lined up next to each other. So while floats were never intended to be a huge part of CSS layout, by default they became the primary means of creating columnar layouts in CSS.
And we'll find that most of the sites that we're going to be referring to or showing in the examples, and the worrisome.com site that we're going to be building in this title, relies on floats for creating columns.
Yeah, I'm looking at a list apart right now, which is a great redesign of this particular web designer and developer resource. If I use my outline in my web developer toolbar and I just outline the floats, you can see exactly what we're talking about, how the floats themselves are creating the dominant portion here of the columnar layout for the site.
So not being originally intended to create column layouts, floats have particular behaviours, and that can cause certain problems for designers who are first starting to use CSS for layout rather than tables for layout. So in this chapter, we're going to look at float behaviours, and we're also going to look at some of the problems that arise and ways of dealing with them.
Excellent.
Rock and roll.
I say we move on.